So if you are in Australia right now, past few days have been quite chaotic and confusing. A lot is happening. I can't keep up. I don't know whether I can keep up. There is a bit of a bloodbath. Not quite the bloodbath yet.
In breaking news, the Reserve Bank has increased the cash rate by 25 basis points, taking it to 4.1%.
Which means that for you and me, we are going to pay more on our mortgage, which will increase the cost of living. Secondly, potentially there will be no groceries on shelves soon as the country is desperately running out of fuel.
I don't think people really understand how deeply exposed Australia is. If this continues for any length of time, forget about driving your EVs, feeling smug about that down to the grocery shop. There will not be any groceries on the shelves. There will not be any planes in the sky.
As you remember, during the COVID pandemic, there were empty shelves in the shops. So we have seen this movie play out before. We know it can happen, and it does happen. So will that happen again? Is it time to panic buy and stock up toilet paper like before? It's always toilet paper. I'm not too sure why. Additionally, Australia will run out of jet fuel as well if the people in charge don't sort out the situation, which means you can't even fly home to see your parents or visit wherever you want to go. Thirdly, as if that's not enough, fuel prices are skyrocketing, and regional Australia is experiencing fuel shortages as we speak.
Perth families are facing a double whammy tonight, with petrol prices also set to rise. Today, drivers were waiting more than half an hour at some fuel stations, queuing to fill up before the cost soars again tomorrow.
Pouring fuel on the cost of living fire.
However, there are mixed messages to the reasons of this chaos. Maybe you and I, the mere peasants, we know the reasons for it. However, the bureaucrats are trying to explain it in a different way. So welcome to African Boss Podcast, keeping you updated with what's happening around us and how this situation will affect us in the diaspora. So please leave your comments below. Help me and others make sense of what is happening now. Maybe you are an economist or a supply chain expert. Leave your comments below. Additionally, how is the rest of the diaspora doing? Leave your comments below, so that would be interesting, so we can learn from each other. So let us review these issues one at a time. First and foremost, the Reserve Bank of Australia has raised its cash rate from 3.85% to 4.1%, so 0.25%. So, okay, this in practical terms means roughly you have a mortgage, say $500,000. What you pay increases up to like, say, $90 a month. For a $700,000 loan, it means an increase of up to, say, $130 or a bit more than that. $1 million mortgage, which is your average entry into the housing market in Australia these days, your pay increases to something like up to maybe $180, maybe $200 a month. So those are not small numbers. Those are just estimates, but it won't be too far from that. On an average mortgage, the increment will be $2,800 a year. That's pretty significant. In real life, what it means for me as a mortgage holder is that I'll have less money to spend on other things, groceries, less money for fuel, and therefore less money for savings, just because I have to pay extra on the mortgage. So something has to give. You can't have it all. So if you are renting, landlords will eventually pass on the cost to their tenants. You might see your rent increase at lease renewal the next time you're applying for a rental. The rentals are already high as it is. We all know this. It is ridiculous. The housing market is fire at the moment. So that is a genuine reason to worry. All this, it boils down to an increased cost of living. It's not like your wage is increasing. Well, lucky if it is, but for most people, it's remained stagnant. So the Reserve Bank's reason for a rate rise is that inflation is too high. They're trying to control inflation. And it's been like that for a while. It's not because of the latest conflict, apparently. In other words, there is too much demand in the country, or people are spending too much money, more than the economy can keep or can handle. So it's not like a productive sort of thing. I believe people are saying that it's because the government spends too much money. It's not that the country is very productive at the moment. No. In fact, the private sector is not doing so well. It's because of government spending. So meaning demand is high, which causes prices to rise. Now, if you don't control this, the Australian dollar loses value fast. When this continues, you drive up the inflation. So in order to slow this down so that the dollar does not lose too much value, so the Reserve Bank of Australia has imposed that rise in interest rate to slow down the spending. So if you're not spending so much, the demand reduces. And hopefully we can avoid a recession.
It'll be much worse if inflation gets built into the fibres, and then we will see the costs of everything going up, and that will be a much worse outcome.
The Reserve Bank governor, she hasn't ruled out recession yet. A recession can still happen if whatever they're doing doesn't work. It still might happen, so that will suck.
With inflation running hot and under more pressure from rising fuel prices as a result of the conflict in the Middle East, the RBA decided to act now rather than wait and see.
This hit with the fuel prices and this additional rise in mortgage rates is going to be hard for some people. I do understand that.
So if that's not enough, what we know is that Australia has about 30 days supply of fuel. I believe the global standard is 90 days, about 3 months. Well, as of last week, it should be 3 weeks by now of fuel supply left for Australia, because Australia imports 90% of its fuel. So things could go south quickly. Energy, as we know, literally fuels the economy. If there is no fuel, there'll be no economy. And fuel prices are skyrocketing. Regional Australia is short on fuel. I just bought fuel today at $2.35 a litre. The same fuel in some of these cheap fuel stations, and I usually buy from cheap fuel stations. Maybe 2 weeks ago, I bought at $2.55. So that's up by 75%. It's a lot in 2 weeks. So then if you're driving all the time, which the majority of Australians do, especially here because the country is vast, people depend on cars for the most part. It is not like London. It means less money in your pocket. So the messaging has been confusing. There is a lot of finger pointing going at the moment by the politicians for the rise in fuel prices. For me, I just assumed that it was because of the war in the Middle East. But apparently there are other factors. Because the government has been saying this, there is enough fuel in this country for now. But the issue is the supply somewhere, a domestic supply issue. And they're saying as for the rise in fuel prices, they are accusing the fuel vendors who are jacking up the prices. Additionally, they're blaming it on panic buying, increasing demand, which is increasing the fuel prices. Which, for me, I just thought, really? While the opposition are pointing at the closure of fuel refineries, those are historical issues, and being underprepared, outsourcing of entire energy industry to cheaper Asian nations, these are fundamental issues. So therefore, you leave yourself vulnerable. There are only 2 refineries operating in some capacity in the whole country. In the past decades, they've closed about 8 or so. Just shut them down. They're too expensive to run. Sometimes I feel that globalization assumes that the world will always be at peace. There'll be no pandemics, as everything is going to go smooth. But as we have seen, that's not the case. You actually do need industries in countries, right? Domestic industries, because if you outsource everything, you're just vulnerable, right? We saw this with COVID. Shelves were empty, as most things are imported from outside, from China. So are we going to see that happening soon? Well, if the issue is not resolved, there'll be no food. There'll be nothing in the grocery shops, and prices will go up, because if fuel is up, automatically everything goes up, because transportation somehow has to be passed on the supply chain, which ends up with us people, customers or consumers, buying more expensive stuff. So the government at the moment is not ruling out rationing of fuel if the Middle East conflict continues. And from the way it's looking, it won't stop anytime soon, right? So say with rationing, if your number plate ends in an even number, you put fuel on that day. If your number ends with an odd number, this is your day. Some sort of similar mechanism. So it's interesting times in the diaspora. There's a lot going on. So how is Africa or the rest of the diaspora faring with all the energy crisis? Leave your comments below. Maybe if you have any suggestions, corrections, or anything like that. I'm not an expert. I'm not an economist. I'm a registered nurse, but I love economics. But I can't possibly explain everything like that. But we can help each other. All right, so I'll see you next time.